Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be taking a look at pro perks, which in my opinion are one of the most interesting bits of forgotten history in the Call of Duty franchise. About a year ago, I made a video titled The Top 10 Removed Features in COD History, and in there, I dove deep into a bunch of features that at one point were staple parts of the franchise, but for one reason or another, they were eventually phased out entirely. In that video, I said that pro perks were a big enough topic to warrant an entirely separate video, so after all this time, we are finally going to take a look at them, talk about how they worked, we're going to talk about why they were added to the series, and ultimately, we're going to talk about why they were forever removed from the Call of Duty franchise. Let's kick things off here today by talking about exactly what pro perks are for those that don't know. So back in Modern Warfare 2, Infinity Ward introduced the idea of the pro perk just 2 years after normal perks were first added to the franchise. The idea was for players to complete specific challenges while using a perk to then unlock an additional benefit for that perk, thus making it more powerful. Some examples of this would be getting 250 kills with stopping power equipped to unlock stopping power pro, which would make it so while you're using that perk, your bullets do extra damage against enemy kill streaks. For getting 100 melee kills while using the commando perk, it would be upgraded to commando pro, which would make you immune to all fall damage while using it. Cold-blooded by default would hide you from UAVs and other targeted kill streaks, and for destroying 40 kill streaks with Cold-Blooded equipped, it would be upgraded to Cold-Blooded Pro, which would make it so your name didn't appear above your head when enemies were targeting you. Every perk in the game had a pro variant and its own specific set of challenges and rewards, and the idea was to give players a deeper level of customization as well as an extra layer of progression on top of the traditional level up and prestige system. Pro perks were a really interesting idea because you were always working towards them, and oftentimes, even in losing matches where you weren't doing very well, you were still having fun because you were working towards unlocking something that wasn't directly tied to attachments or weapon camos or things like that. Two of my favorite challenges from the Modern Warfare 2 era were the challenges to unlock Marathon and Lightweight Pro. By default, the Marathon perk would give you unlimited sprint, and if you ran for a total of 26 miles with that perk equipped, it would upgrade to allow you to mantle over objects faster. The same was true of the Lightweight perk. By default, Lightweight would allow you to move 7% faster, and after sprinting for 30 miles with that perk equipped, it would upgrade to allow you to recover from sprint faster than normal, which is sort of similar to the Gung Ho perk that we've seen in recent Call of Duty titles. What this meant was that no matter what was happening in the game, you always felt like you were working towards something, whether you were just aimlessly sprinting around the map to unlock Marathon Pro, or you were running over dead bodies to get scavenger packs to get Scavenger Pro, or heaven forbid, if you were hunting down enemy claymores to unlock Sitrep Pro, there was an extra layer of progression in the game on top of simply leveling up and winning matches and getting headshots. It wasn't all roses and sunshine, however, because each time you prestiged, your pro perks would reset, meaning you had to redo all those challenges to re-unlock them. This was particularly annoying in some cases. A great example of this would be unlocking Ninja Pro. By default, all Ninja would do is make you immune to the heartbeat sensor, which wasn't very useful in and of itself, which meant that if you wanted to make your footsteps silent, you had to unlock Ninja Pro, and this was particularly frustrating because to unlock Ninja Pro, you had to get 40 close range kills. And when I say close range, I mean very close range. Because of how Modern Warfare 2 worked, the shotguns could oftentimes get kills outside of that special range, which meant that the best way to get Ninja Pro back in the day was to simply run around with the default tactical knife class and knife 40 people. After you did this, you would get Ninja Pro and things were fine, and to be honest, it wasn't really that big of a deal doing it one time, but needing to do this every single prestige just so you could be competitive in game modes like Search and Destroy and Free-for-All, well, that became pretty tedious on your way up to 10th Prestige. Having to do that 10 times was definitely a chore, and not that many people enjoyed doing it. The same was true of a few other perk challenges. Sure, there were some easy challenges out there, like for Stopping Power Pro and Sleight of Hand Pro. You could basically do those every single Prestige, no problem, but challenges like destroying 120 claymores with sitrep would take ages. In fact, it took so long that most people never even took the time to unlock that perk legitimately. This would oftentimes lead players to boosting in the back of the map with their friends, or players giving up on prestiging altogether because it was now way more work than it ever had been before, or people would simply just join modded lobbies to permanently unlock everything because modded lobbies were very rampant back in 2010. Overall, I feel as though the idea of pro perks was a very interesting one. It gave players something to do in the game besides the standard level up and get headshot challenges that we see today. By making it so we had challenges reset every single prestige, players always had something to do and something to work towards, and I honestly think that was one of the many reasons why Modern Warfare 2 was as popular as it was. Even if you were a terrible player, and let's be honest here, most of us were back then, right? We may not have thought it at the time, but looking back, we were freaking awful. Even then, we were engaging with the game on a much deeper level because we were constantly working towards unlocking pro perks and new attachments, new camos, new levels, and of course, new prestiges. It was a really fun time in Call of Duty's history, and the very next year, Treyarch would do something similar with their brand new IP, Call of Duty Black Ops. So when it came to the original Black Ops, it seemed like Treyarch had one mission statement: take all of Infinity Ward's ideas from Modern Warfare 2 and give them the Treyarch Twist. We saw this previously back in World at War, where they took ideas from Modern Warfare and adapted them to a World War II setting. Well, here they basically took the ideas of Modern Warfare 2 and adapted them to a Cold War/Vietnam setting. A great example of this would be how Treyarch decided to alter the kill streak system that we saw in Modern Warfare 2. The original Black Ops had insanely powerful kill streaks, just like we had back in Modern Warfare 2, but this time around, they did not stack upon themselves, which meant that players had to really work towards those kill streaks much harder than they had to previously, and we saw the same thing introduced with the Treyarch version of the Pro Perk system. So in the original Black Ops, Treyarch decided to take the Pro Perk system to the next level, so to speak. Instead of just requiring X amount of kills or destroy X amount of things, Treyarch decided to weave perk challenges into different game modes, which honestly was one of the most brilliant ideas that the franchise has ever seen. So for example, remember how in Modern Warfare 2, the Marathon perk required you to run for 26 miles to unlock Marathon Pro? Well, in the original Black Ops, to unlock Marathon Pro, you again had to sprint for 26 miles, but on top of that, you also had to get 10 First Blood medals, and you also had to capture the flag in the Capture the Flag game mode 15 times with that perk equipped. How brilliant is that? To unlock the pro version of Marathon, you were required to play Capture the Flag, which meant that CTF had a steady population throughout the entirety of the Black Ops lifecycle. People had to try out that game mode and play the objective in it to unlock the pro version of one of the most popular perks in the game, and even if they hated that game mode, they at the very least gave it a chance and they experienced a lot more of what the game had to offer. The same is true of Flak Jacket. We all remember Flak Jacket in the original Black Ops being one of the strongest perks ever, but do you remember that to unlock Flak Jacket Pro, you had to survive 10 explosions, you had to throw back 5 enemy grenades, and you also had to plant or defuse 10 bombs in either demolition, sabotage, or search and destroy. I absolutely loved these kinds of challenges, but I understand why some people didn't. As a lot of you guys know, in Black Ops 4, I completed 100% of the multiplayer challenges. It took a long time, and it was tedious towards the end, especially because some of these challenges involved running around and punching people in hardcore, or getting 50 wins in Heist, which is just a game mode that I don't personally enjoy. It felt like a grind. I did it, but it definitely felt like a grind, but I can honestly say I never felt that way back in the original Black Ops. I think the reason is, back in the original Black Ops, the challenges were organic and they really worked well with the theme of the perk as well as the spirit of the game mode. A great example of this would be Lightweight Pro. To unlock that, you need to get kills on enemies that were near their own objective, which makes sense because that's what the Lightweight perk does. It allows you to get places faster. The implementation of game modes into these challenges was a really good idea, but it also wasn't like every single perk was tied to a game mode either. You could earn Hacker Pro just by getting kills with equipment and using the motion sensor. You could unlock Hardened Pro by shooting enemies through walls and destroying enemy aircraft, and you could get Hardline Pro by sharing care packages with teammates, as well as just going on big kill streaks. Each set of perk challenges was unique, and Treyarch really went above and beyond, trying to make the pro perks interesting back in the original Black Ops, Though it wasn't all perfect, right? Just like back in Modern Warfare 2, pro perks did reset when you prestiged, and a lot of them were very grindy. They required a pretty hefty time investment, and sometimes they also required a bit of luck. A great example of this would be the challenges to unlock Ghost Pro. I don't know what they were thinking with this one. To upgrade your Ghost perk to also hide you from enemy kill streaks and thermal scopes, you needed to get 20 kills while they had a UAV up in the sky, which isn't too hard. You also had to destroy 30 pieces of aircraft with a launcher, also not that bad, but on top of that, you also had to destroy a sentry gun. Do you guys have any idea how rare it was for somebody on the other team to not only be using a sentry gun, but also be good enough to actually get it, call it in, place it, and for you to be the one to actually be able to destroy it? It was so frustrating. It got to the point where throughout Prestiges 1 through 14, I didn't even bother going for Ghost Pro because I knew I was not going to get it by the time I was ready to Prestige again. Once I made it to my 15th Prestige, I started playing with a full party of my buddies, and we would literally all throw down sentry gun care packages into the enemy spawn just so they could take them and place down the sentry so we could hopefully be able to kill it and unlock Ghost Pro. The same was true of the Tactical Mask perk. To get Tac Mask Pro, the hardest challenge was killing 20 enemies who were affected by Nova Gas. You wouldn't think that would be really all that hard, but it honestly was, and to this day, my buddy Cypher still has not gone past the 6th Prestige in the original Black Ops just because he doesn't want to go through the pain of re-unlocking Tactical Mask Pro and Ghost Pro. Still, despite all of that, I must say that I love the design philosophy that went into creating the Pro Perk challenges in the original Black Ops, but in the long run, I'm not sure how good they were for the game. Like I mentioned earlier, to get Marathon Pro, you needed to capture 15 flags in CTF, and good luck at this day and age finding a lobby for Capture the Flag on the original Black Ops, let alone scoring 15 flags within that game mode. Now the original Black Ops is almost 10 years old, we're at the point where it's near impossible for players to unlock certain pro perks, just because some of the game modes that were tied to these perks have no one playing them anymore. The population is literally zero in a lot of these lesser known modes, like for example CTF, Sabotage, or even Demolition. This is one of the reasons why I believe pro perks were ultimately removed from the franchise, but thankfully we would have at least one more year of these things before they were finally removed for good. So in Modern Warfare 3, Infinity Ward would bring back pro perks for the final time. It's strange to think that a feature like this, which was loved by so many people and was used in 3 of the most popular Call of Duty games ever, it's weird to think that it would just end up being removed entirely. The pro perks in Modern Warfare 3 were very similar to the ones that we saw back in Modern Warfare 2. Infinity Ward would essentially do away with the game mode specific challenges that were implemented by Treyarch, and instead they would go back to one big challenge as compared to 3 smaller ones. So to unlock Dead Silence Pro back in Modern Warfare 3, you would once again need to earn 50 close range kills. To get Stalker Pro, you would have to get 120 kills while aiming down sights and moving. To get Overkill Pro, you need to get 120 kills with your second primary weapon, so on and so forth, right? They were basically just kill requirements, and they were a lot more streamlined than what we saw back in the original Black Ops. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this would be the final time that we would see pro perks in the Call of Duty franchise, and I have a few theories as to why that is. Number 1, there was a pretty significant power gap between players who did have pro perks and players who did not have pro perks. One of the oldest debates in the Call of Duty franchise is whether or not it's a good idea to prestige, right? A lot of people feel as though prestiging is fun, it's a cool thing to do in the game, they have fun doing it, whereas other people feel as though prestiging is completely pointless and there's no actual prestige to it. Well, I would argue that in Modern Warfare 2, the original Black Ops, and Modern Warfare 3, prestiging was actually somewhat prestigious, because every time you did that, your pro perks were all reset. You were actively making yourself a weaker player, because not only were you losing access to a bunch of weapons and a bunch of baseline perks, but even once you unlocked those perks again, you didn't have the pro version. You had to re-unlock that as well, so you were actively making yourself weaker and weaker every time you prestiged, which meant that once you got to the final prestige and you re-unlocked everything for the final time, there was a real sense of accomplishment to that. Now, another reason why I feel as though pro perks were removed from the franchise is because of the internal data collected by the developers. I don't know about you guys, but as I was prestiging in all of these games, I would only get the perks up to pro that I really cared about, right? And I would basically ignore over all the other perks in the game. A good example of this would be Marathon. I would get Marathon Pro every single prestige in Modern Warfare 2, no matter what, because I could passively work towards it while I was playing the game. The same was true of Sleight of Hand Pro, Stopping Power Pro, Scavenger Pro. I would get these every single prestige because they fit my playstyle and I use them so often. On the flip side of things, however, perks like Sit Rep, Danger Close, and Scrambler would go completely unused every single prestige, and I'm sure this is true for lots of you guys as well. We would basically only work on a couple of perks every prestige, and the rest of them would go completely unused until we hit our final prestige. Maybe the developers thought that fans didn't like pro perks because so many of these challenges went unfinished. Now, another possibility is that Call of Duty wanted to switch to a more casual target audience. Call of Duty, in my opinion, is already the ultimate pick-up-and-play first-person shooter, but a lot of people at a casual level believe to their core that their power as a character lies within their guns, their attachments, and their perks, even though that's not necessarily true. A good player can dominate with even default classes, but to a casual player, the idea of having pro perks in the game may have actually turned them away from it. By locking extra perk benefits behind time-consuming challenges, maybe these fans felt as though Call of Duty had too big of a barrier to entry, and as a result, maybe they decided to remove pro perks from the franchise to appeal more to that casual player base. Then again, I suppose that theory doesn't necessarily work, because 2 of the 3 games that had pro perks also had death streaks, which were the ultimate equalizer for casual players, and when pro perks went away, so did death streaks, so that's definitely pretty interesting. Ultimately, we don't know why pro perks were removed from the series. We do know that they were featured in 3 of the most popular games in the history of the franchise, and as somebody who has well over 150 days of total playtime between those 3 games alone, I can definitely say that they were awesome features and I wish they would return to the series. If they do ever get reintroduced, I can see a situation where the developers make the perks not reset upon prestige, but maybe take a little bit longer to unlock in the first place. Maybe instead of having Marathon Pro require 26 miles to unlock, why not make it require 100 miles to unlock across all of your prestiges, and once you unlock it, it never goes away. At the same time, I would still like to see them reintroduce game mode specific challenges for some of the pro perks as well, though as I mentioned earlier, there are some obvious downsides to this because once the game falls out of favor, the player base begins to dwindle, and with a dwindling player base, it can be hard to complete game mode specific challenges. Regardless of how they're implemented though, I would really like to see pro perks make a return, and that's what inspired this video here today. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. There's the history of pro perks in the Call of Duty franchise and the legacy that they left behind. I would love to know down there in the comments, what game, not even necessarily just Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops, and Modern Warfare 3, but just any game in general, which game did the perk system the best in your own personal opinion? Leave your thoughts and feedback down below. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.